welcome everyone to our fourth meetup and the first of 2020.
Woo!
Very happy to see so many people here today. So, then I need to get the clicker.
Is it not working?
Okay,
Right.
Thanks, Scott. So we're the organizers. So I'm Shen.
I'm Zoe.
And well, we've been doing that now for a year almost. And well, we're very happy to have these speakers today for you.
Yeah, so this is actually the first time that we've done this format, which is a lightning talk format. And with us, we have three speakers today. The first one is Yuan Qing from Shopify. The second is Chenmu from Shopee. And last but not least, we have Dylan Field, the CEO of Figma, here with us.
Woo! Okay. So our agenda for today, well, we're doing the intro right now. Then we have the talks by the three speakers, and we'll have a Q&A afterwards. And we'll conclude with job openings. For the Q&A, oh, no, later.
Before the Q&A section, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Grab, for providing us with this beautiful venue. There's Yolanda, who's sitting somewhere. Figma, of course, for the food and the swags and the awesome tools. And Jules from Sketch Meetup Singapore, who greeted you when you were downstairs. This goes to say that even when you use different tools, you can still come together and create something beautiful together.
Yes,
and
we're very open.
Yeah. And last but not least, my boss, who also came over here to carry chairs and tables for you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, for the Q&A bit, we have a Slido again. So you can use this QR code and it will open up a page where you can submit your questions. So for the questions, I would like to ask you to please use the format of the person's name, or if you don't remember the name, the company, and then follow up with your question. We'll show the slide later again as well, so no worries about that.
Or just remember Figmeet number 4 when you go to sli.do. Cool. We good?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay, so now I want to call in our first speaker. Please give a warm welcome to Yuan Qing.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? I should speak a bit closer. Okay, so good evening everybody. My name is Yuan Qing. I'm a designer at Shopify. So I'm super excited to be here today, and thanks to Shen and Zoe as well for organizing this meetup and inviting me to be here. So my talk is entitled Figma Plugins, Working Precisely and Efficiently in Figma. So there are 3 parts to my talk today. What are plugins, why you should probably use them, and the how. I will demo like 4 plugins that I've made myself and talk a bit about like some of the UX principles that I followed when I made these plugins. So I want to bring everybody as much value as I can in the 15 minutes that I have here. So I'll just dive right in with like the what. So what exactly are Figma plugins? So if you don't already know, like Figma plugins was launched in, I believe, in August of 2019. It is a way for you to customize, extend, and automate Figma. So plugins can actually access the contents of the document. So the plugin can also show some UI. So you can show some UI to a designer, and then they can make some configuration and settings. Plugins also have access to like browser APIs. So if you want to make an API call, you want to accept a file from the user, you can do that. So plugins are built the same way as Figma itself, where it's running on web technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So plugins, you can think about it as like, you know, Apple, there's this saying, right? there's an app for that. So I think you can say the same for Figma plugins as well. There is probably a plugin for that, even though it's only been 5 months. If you go to like the plugin ecosystem here, so this is how you actually access the plugin UI in Figma. On the left side, you have the plugins tab, and then you can actually scroll down and you can see all the plugins that are available. So if you look at the rate at which plugins are being uploaded, every 1 to 2 weeks, you will see a batch of plugins being added to Figma itself that is available to everybody. And in terms of the download numbers is quite staggering, in like 80,000 for like the level 1 plugin in Figma. Sorry about that. So I think the last point I want to make is that your design tools are really just a means to an end. So plugins are just one way for you to actually make your design tools actually work for your particular use case. So plugins coming to Figma really gives us the opportunity to really customize and sort of like bend Figma to our will almost, which brings us now to like the why of plugins. So there are a few reasons why you would want to use plugins. And the first one, I think, is speed. With plugins, you can actually work super fast in Figma. And I love this tweet by Shou. Shou is the, I think, director of product at Figma. So he's just saying here that computers are really good at repetitive tasks. Humans are the ones who can actually think and feel. So if you use plugins, you can leave the repetitive work to Figma, and then you can focus on more productive tasks, such as user research or collaborating with your team, so on and so forth. So number one is like plugins give you like that huge speed boost when you're working. Second reason for using plugins is, I think, precision. So you can think of plugins as like giving Figma like very explicit commands. So you can tell Figma, move these layers 10 pixels to the right, replace this with that. So everything becomes super precise. And if you are a designer who cares about details, and I hope you are, this is like a huge thing for you, where having tools that can allow you to deliver that level of precision in the work is going to be very valuable. And the last point is that I think they make difficult things easy. So sort of the obvious point, I guess, plugins can make API calls. They can do all sorts of stuff, can do like complex math calculations that would be probably impossible to do manually. And if you want to do it by hand, you want to do it manually, it's going to be extremely, extremely tedious and painful for you. So like these are the 3 reasons why I think I use plugins and why I try to make my own as well. So you can think of like the tools that you use as like a bicycle. So I'm thinking about this like as an analogy here, where with a bicycle, you can go a bit further. You can, it's an easier time than walking. Obviously, you can just walk to where you want to go, but with a bicycle, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot faster. Second point is that I think just like riding a bike, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. You will definitely need to invest some time to learn your tools well. And I think the last point is that you know of people who really go all out to customize their bikes. And I think with plugins, you can actually do that with Figma as well. You can really customize your tool to work exactly the way that you want it. So moving on now to like the how of plugins. And before going to that, I just want to share like a very good shortcut. If you want to work fast in Figma, I would recommend to learn this shortcut, Command/. So if I were to go to my working file here, Command/ actually opens up the hamburger menu, and the search bar is actually in focus. So you can immediately start typing into it and then press enter to launch the command that you're looking for. So that is like a pro tip for you. If there's one thing you take away, learn this keyboard shortcut. It will really speed things up if you really want to work really fast in Figma. So the first plugin that I'm going to show you today is called Language Tester. And as the name suggests, it is meant for you to actually test your UI in different languages. So actually at Shopify, the merchants that we are helping out, who are running on Shopify, actually are all over the world. And they actually use Shopify experiences in a variety of different languages. So the use case of this plugin is to actually make sure that the UI and the experiences we design will actually work for all the different merchants who are using Shopify in a multitude of languages. So it actually runs on this, the Yandex Translate API, which is the free API within certain limits, I guess. The quality isn't that great, but I think for our use cases, it is good enough. So I can just quickly show you how this plugin actually works. So I need to go back to my working file here. So I'm on my file. The way it works is you just select the layers that you want to translate. And then I'm just going to run the command / keyboard shortcut. And then I'm going to run language tester. So when you do that, you see a menu of languages that show up. And the way that you would use this plugin is to simply select the language you want to translate to. So suppose I want to translate things to French. There's a bit of loading indicator there, and then everything goes to the language that you want. So the nice thing about this plugin is that it's one click to actually test your UI in a different language. So if you are supporting like 5 different languages, you can easily toggle between the languages fairly easily. And another nice thing is that it doesn't actually destroy the document. So you want to maintain the original version. So by closing the plugin, everything reverts back to English. So you retain the original version of your design. So the second plugin that I'm going to talk about is it's called Format Currency. So format currency is so at Shopify, just like our merchants are all over the world, they also sell to overseas audiences. So chances are within the admin itself, they actually will see money in different currency formats. So this plugin is meant to sort of operationalize the rules that we have in Polaris. Polaris is Shopify's design system. So I will not go too much into detail here, but essentially there is something called a short format and an explicit format. So in the short format, we do not indicate like the currency code, whereas for explicit format, we will indicate like the currency code after the money value itself. And a couple other details here is that depending on the locale, the language, the position of the decimal place, whether to use a comma or a dot or a space, it will also be dependent on the locale. So there's a whole bunch of rules to have to follow if you are a designer at Shopify, and this is where format currency comes in. So it helps to encode basically all the rules of Polaris, the guidelines are encoded within the plugin itself. So if I'm a designer, I don't need to go and memorize the rules. I don't need to have to manually go and set things myself. I can just simply run the plugin. So similar to language tester, you select the layers that you want to work on with the money values, and then you can just type in format currency. So you see a menu shows up with, I'm not sure if you can see it. There's like a preview window showing you the end result of running the plugin. And then there's an option here to toggle between the format that you want. So suppose I want to change from short format to explicit format. I can run the plugin and then everything will be updated accordingly. So this is really the perfect use case of like a Figma plugin. Where you want to automate certain rules that are pretty well defined. And as a designer at Shopify, I don't really need to remember all the different nuances of the different ways to format currency. I can just use this plugin here, and everything is done pretty automatically. So the next plugin that I'm going to talk about is called Clean Document. So as the name suggests, it helps to clean up your Figma document. So in the interest of time, I'll just jump into like the demo here. So you might encounter this often where you have a piece of UI, and then if you look at the layer list, things are not really organized in a way that makes sense. You have it's a bit of a mess on the left side, so things are not named properly. you have things like hidden layers. It's not really easy to work with, and it might be because you got this document from another designer, or maybe you were iterating really fast and you didn't bother to clean it up. So I guess you might encounter this before. You can manually clean it up yourself, but another way is to actually run the plugin called Clean Document. So when you do that, you see a UI shows up with certain options that you can decide. So what this plugin does is it will delete hidden layers, it will remove nested groups. So sometimes when you're working really fast, you like to nest and create many groups. This will remove all those things. It will make things pixel perfect. So it will round, like if it's 0.5, it will round it to 1. And this thing called smart rename layers. So the layer names will be cleaned up like in a magical way, and then smart sort as well. So I can just run it easily on what I've selected here. When I run it, you notice that everything is, with just one click, everything is cleaned up without you having to do it yourself manually. And it's a lot easier to work with by just running this simple command here. And then it's very useful for if you are iterating really fast, and then when you have satisfied what you want, you run this command, and then you can start to clean things up, defining your components, defining your text style, so on and so forth. So imagine trying to do this we have 10 artboards. If you want to do this by hand, it will take forever. This plugin would just work, and then it would just clean up everything. So I highly recommend checking this out. It's called Clean Document. The next plugin that I'm going to talk about is I guess similar to the previous one. It's called Organize Layers, and as the name suggests, it actually organizes layers by name. And I will just demo how this plugin works using Figma's. This is actually an open source file from Figma itself. It is the design system that Figma uses for their editor interface. So what I'm going to do first is to move all the components to their own page. The way that Figma has set it up is such that they have embedded the components within the style guide itself. So first things first, I will move them to its own page first. So I created a new page, name it components, and then I will just select all layers, select components. This is like a plugin that I worked on. So running this would select all the components on the page. And then I just need to right click, move it to its own page. So everything is all on this page now, but it's obviously still a mess. Things are not really easy to read and pass. So what I can do is to just run the Organize Layers plugin. So when I do that, so there's some options here. You can group based on the layer name. You can group by like the text before the first slash or the second slash. You can customize the spacing. And then I'll just go with the defaults. So by just running this, everything becomes a lot neater. If you want to look at, like, if you name your layers properly, this will really rearrange things, and you can look at the different states of your UI side by side, and it really eases this process with one click. So imagine going from this to the organized state. If you want to do this manually, it will take forever. And again, this is like a perfect use case for a plugin where the rules are very well defined and repetitive. It's very tedious, right? This is where a plugin can really solve all your problems. These are some like resources that I would recommend you to check out if you want to get into writing your own plugins as well. So this is like the official plugin docs. It's pretty comprehensive, and if you really want to start plugin development, I would recommend reading every single page in the guide that Figma has provided. Figma also provides like some simple toy plugins that are very like simplified examples that will be helpful for if you're just starting out. All my plugins are available at my URL, figma.com/my name. You can find it all here, and everything is also open source under my GitHub. I think we'll be sharing the slides later as well. One tool that I would like to share is also this thing called Create Figma plugin. If you are into web development and you know JavaScript pretty well, you might want to consider using something like this. It's a toolkit that I made to make my own plugin development a lot easier. Figma has a pretty low-level API, and I wrote my own, like a lot of helper functions and a command line utility to bundle my plugin using JavaScript. So you might want to check this out as well. So I'm just going to close off the talk by talking about some UX principles of what I consider to be a good Figma plugin. To me personally, I take sort of the work that I do with regards to Figma plugins pretty seriously. I'm a bit of a nerd about UI design and like UI engineering, and the bar for me is pretty high. So I think that the first thing, which is the most obvious one, is that the plugin should be cohesive with the Figma UI. It shouldn't feel out of place. It should use the same styles. It should behave the same way. And I actually re-implemented a lot of the UI that Figma has in Preact, because Figma doesn't actually provide like an official component library. So this is like a storybook. You might have seen this before. It has all the UI that you might need in the plugin. So things like text boxes, check boxes, segmented controls, autocomplete, things like that are all available here. So having this is I can really iterate on UI really, really quickly, as opposed to having to rewrite everything every time I need to make a new plugin. So this is like increasing my own speed when it comes to plugin development. The second point is that I think plugins should optimize for efficiency. What this means is you should reduce the number of steps to do anything. So to give an example, so an example would be, so I'm just running this plugin called Move Layers. So when I run the plugin, you will see that the first text box is going to be in focus. Let me do that again. So the first text box is always in focus. So I don't even need to leave my keyboard. I don't need to use my mouse to click on the text box here. It's already in focus so that I can immediately type in whatever I want. And then I can press enter as well. So everything is like incredibly efficient. Another thing is when it comes to like the UI choices you make, this is like a drop down would be two clicks, right? So a better alternative, I think, would be either a radio button or like a segmented control where it's just one click. And then you're already cutting down on, you're really brutal about the number of clicks that you're putting in front of the user here. The fewer clicks, the better. Next point is that I prefer to have labels over icons. So I think with design tools, some of the concepts that are in the tool itself are a bit difficult to convey really coherently in an icon. So I prefer to be explicit, spell out what exactly the UI is, as opposed to trying to represent things in an icon. So example I can show you is this. So this plugin, it basically does what it says. It draws the slides over whatever you selected. So instead of like, because there's this thing called a padding thing, padding. So it's really hard to really communicate this with an icon. So I prefer to just spell it out exactly what this text box is for. So I input 10 and then now we have the slides. The next principle is, I think, remembering the user's inputs. So you don't want it to be like every time I run the plugin, I'm starting from zero, where I need to input everything again and again. It's going to be incredibly annoying if that happens. So just now I was running this plugin called Draw Slides Over Selection. So if I run it again, it remembers what I input previously. So I don't need to do anything. I can just run the plugin without having to input what I've already given Figma earlier. The next point, I think, is sort of like design 101, system feedback. You want to make sure that the designer who's using your plugin knows what's happening in your system, providing helpful error messages, having a success message. And if there's any loading, if you are calling an API, there should be some sort of loading indicator to make sure that the user is aware of what's happening in the system. I think the last point here is to allow keyboard controls. So I can run maybe one of the plugins. So allowing keyboard controls means that I can press Shift, Tab, tabbing between the different fields. Pressing Escape would close the plugin. Pressing Enter would run the plugin. Having it be, if I want to increment values, I can press up on the up and down the arrow keys. Shift up would increment by 10 and -10, so on and so forth. So all of these are like the nitty-gritty details, I guess, when it comes to UI engineering that would be good to pay attention to. And I guess, to be honest, all of these like principles are just general principles of good form design, good UX design. And you can take this and apply it to like your particular design you're working on as well. Not just Figma plugins that you're working on. Okay, so I'm sort of towards the end of the talk now. So just a couple key takeaways. Plugins give you speed, they give you precision, and they make difficult things a lot easier. Obviously, there's going to be a learning curve. I think of it as like a bicycle. You need to invest a bit of time and energy to go and learn the tools well. I'll recommend for everybody to, when you go back to work, go and look at the workflow that you're using when you use your design tools. Is there anything that you're doing repetitively? Is there anything that you find to be extremely time consuming? There's a chance that a plugin can solve that. And if the plugin doesn't already exist, you can think about making one yourself. And maybe that's a final point. Tools are just a means to an end. Focus on outcomes. You may not need plugins in your day-to-day work. It really depends on your particular use case. So focus on outcomes. Focus on what you're trying to do with the time that you're spending in the design tool. And that's it. Thank you. Sorry, while I'm here, I'm just going to give a shout out that Shopify is hiring for a senior UXer and a senior researcher. And Aditi is here as well. Can Aditi give a wave? We'll be here after the talk as well to chat with anybody. And you're going to talk about Figma or Shopify. Happy to have a chat. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so if you have any questions for him later, please submit your questions. Okay, now I would like to welcome our next speaker, Chenmu. Give him a warm welcome. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Chenmu from Shopee. And today I'm going to share about enjoy collaborative growth with Figma in Shopee. So I think all of you come here because you are interested in Figma. So no matter if you just know about the tool and still hesitating about whether you should use it, or you have just started to explore things around, or you are already a very experienced user. So today I'm going to talk why do we choose Figma in Shopee, our migration process, and our current usage. Basically, the journey of us migrating to Figma. So first, why do we choose Figma? Shopee's design team has grown from less than 10 people to around 50 right now within 2 years. So on average, we are having two new joiners per month. So actually, we divided ourselves into design studios, and most of us are working on Shopee, the app. And as the business is growing, we are also working on other apps like AirPay, which is a payment platform. Okay, Shopee, I think Shopee, most of you will know, it's one of the largest e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia. And we have AirPay, which is a payment platform, and we have Now Food and Ultra for food delivery and restaurant management, and we have a branding team. So as the business is expanding, I think we have a very urgent need to have a good communication tool. And we try to deliver consistency a consistent UI and UX across all our products and all our teams to let all the designers working together. So within our designers, we need to manage our design language system. And usually the design language system is contributed and managed by multiple designers. So the collaboration is very important. And we need a version control for all our iterations of designs. So between designers, PMs, we need a very effective review and feedback tool for our review process. And between designer and developer, we need a sweet handoff and also versioning for our development. So previously, our tool used is Sketch. So we create our Sketch component library, and we export images to our PMs to do the design reviews. We use Evision to make prototypes. And we use the plugin Sketch Measure to export our specs. We use Zeppelin to manage sort of our component library. And we use Abstract to do our version control. So all these tools are used to meet our communication objectives. And actually, this will create many problems like conflict versions. We upload everything into Dropbox so everybody can share the file. So, but if we're working on the same file, there will be a lot of conflict versions. And there will be discrepancy between if we export design from software to software while the design is still changing and iterating. So there will be a difference between what we upload to InVision and what we have in Sketch. So there will be a lot of discrepancies, and we do a lot of exporting, which is tedious. So that's why what we want to have is something in sync and centralized so that everybody is looking at the same thing, and it is a single source of truth, and it's transparent so that PMs and developers can involve in a very early stage to give feedbacks. So we chose Figma because it kind of replaced our tools used previously, and it has a very powerful component system so that we can manage our design language system. And also everything is synchronized and auto saved so that everybody is looking at the single piece of design, so that there is less misunderstanding. So that's why. So after we've made the decision to use Figma, we started our migration process. So it has already been 4 months since I registered Figma as one of the first ones in our team. So we tested with very few projects first. One team, we built one team library with 2 designers. And now, right now, we have 30 plus teams in our organization plan. And we have 20 team libraries and over 600 members in our organization account. So actually, only 50 of us are designers. And so that means most of our users are PMs and developers and other business stakeholders that need to see our design files. So actually, the design team in Shopee serves as a very important role as a communication point where we come out with our designs and interfaces very fast so that the business stakeholders can visualize their requests and get revisions very fast. So actually, it is very collaborative and everybody is looking at the same thing. So in order to facilitate this transition, what we do is we have guides for designers because Figma has provided very comprehensive tutorials online and it's explained every single features. I think it's very good, but most of the designers may not have the patience to look through all the tutorials. And what they really ask the most is the question, how is it different from Sketch? So, and the second one, can I work my files offline? And then these are the specific questions that designers are really interested in instead of every single features. So what we provide is a FAQ for them, especially addressing how is it different from Sketch and explaining the differences. And then we have good practices, for example, Figma use image fields. so that it reduces a lot of effort to create masks so that the layers are much cleaner. So we have a Figma file for all the good practices. So these are the guides we provide for designers. And we also provide guide for PMs and developers because most of our users are PMs and developers. So what they are really interested in Figma is different from designers. They want to know how to view specs, how to export, and what does this left bar mean, how to find things in pages and sharing. So what these mostly they cannot find tutorials online. So we provide a guide for PMs and developers. So actually, although we have all these documents, I think most of the time, people are still not patient enough to look through the documents. So we conduct workshops to help the designers to get hands-on Figma, to know about how components work, how the team library work better. So like this, we are trying out drawing figures with different components and making a fun session. So after that, we create plugins also. So it's just besides Yuan Qing's clean document, and I've created Arrow Auto because our PMs likes to see UI flowcharts very much instead of prototypes. So they like to see prototypes. There is flowcharts, so we create a tool that can automatically draw arrow between two elements. And if you happen to move things around, what you have to do is just to click update, and things will, the arrows will be updated. And thanks to Figma's feature, it's already over 10,000 downloads right now. And we have future plans for actually internal plugins that are very specific to Shopee's design language. Like we use Roboto, so that's sort of like a Shopee toolbox. So we use Roboto, so we have some feature like check Roboto and check spacing. So that's our kind of like a future plan. Yeah. So moving on to our current usage, how we organize our file is that because Figma has a very fixed file organization structure. So you only have teams, projects. You cannot create folders under folders and on folders. So you only have teams, projects, files, pages, and it goes to the design. So we put features. So we create each teams for each feature, and then we create projects for each country because we have different designs for different countries. And then we create sub-features on the files, and then we keep the development versions using pages, and then the design itself. So for example, teams, we have maybe our studio DY have a feature called digital products. And then the projects we create is ID for Indonesia. And then for files, we have a train ticket, maybe top up or plane ticket. And then for pages, we recommend, we record on the versions. And then for design, we use a cover to show the status of the design. And then, yeah, that's how we organize it currently. And as you may know, we already have 30 plus teams right now. So actually, things get a bit messy when we expand, and we are still trying to explore how we can do this better. And maybe Figma will have better features to help us, maybe searching that can help us to organize our files. Yeah. And regarding to design our component library, we adopt the atomic design methodology. So we create textile spacing colors first, and then followed by icons and elements, and then components and layouts. So it's supposed to be like this. So we have different features and create a big team library for that. It's shared by different features. But later, actually, we think that this might not be sufficient because we have very distinctive features. For example, we have homepage and Shopee Pay and digital products and flash sales. Because the user's target is very different, and we have quite different designs with quite different components. So, and it's just specifically for those features. So if we put everything into the team library, it will be a huge library, and it will be difficult to find things. And you will be only using very little part of the library when you're doing a feature. But if you separate all features into different libraries, things will get misaligned because they're not connected. We still want to have overarching basic control of our design language. So what we do is currently, ideally, we have a core library and a style guide, and we create UI kit for each feature. And then the UI kit is created using the components from the core library, and then adopting to different projects. So if you are working on this file, what you need to open is only the UI kit for the feature instead of everything. So for example, so inside our core library, we will have tabs that have 4 tabs, 3 tabs, 2 tabs, different types of tabs. And we have elements for the tabs like active and inactive. And so if we're working on a feature of, for example, feature 1, so it only requires the option of we use 3 tabs with a very specific wording. And then we'll create a master component on top of that. So what you have to do is just to only open the feature UI kit. So instead of finding things from the core library from everywhere. And another example is that like we have a lot of buttons, and so for this feature, what we need to do is we have this pay now button, and we have this bottom bar, and we use the button, and this is only used in feature 2 so that we create a master component for that. And what when we're working on feature 2, what we only need to open is just the single library. That's how we organize things. And this Venn diagram roughly illustrates the idea. I think you get the idea. So that actually the core library defines the universal and the basic components. And then the feature libraries is using the core libraries component, but actually they are containing components that are very specifically used in different cases. So when we are working on brand new feature, of course, we start from the core library. And it will create, when the project grows, we'll create a lot of local components and styles. So after we have a review session, we will have a feature kit. So if we find a lot of components, local components used in different files, we will have a meeting and discussion to move into our feature UI kit. And if we have a lot of, if we find similar components in our features, we will try to have a review session and move it to our core library. And actually, currently, we try not to do any changes to the core library, but that's the plan. So that's kind of the basic idea, so that the system can grow horizontally and vertically, because each project will also have the local components. So it's kind of an organic system that can be scaled and grow in a sustainable way. And so this is current usage of our our library. So you can see when we work the hardest. It's like around this period, it has per week have around 15,000 insertions, and then it comes the Christmas holiday. But there's another reason for that, is that initially we depend on the core libraries very intensively. And then when we started to build another tier of libraries, and we do not rely on it that much. So this is the ideal situation, and we are still working towards it, because we adopt Figma at very different stage, because we have different teams, and we adopt Figma and use Figma in very different stage. So some of the team, they just started to import files into Figma, and some of us are already completed this. So we are at a very different stage, but I would say that it's not a very easy process to migrate, especially for a team. For us, we have 50 people, and the process feel like we are trying to improve our tuk-tuk into a Ferrari when we are still driving on the road full speed, because we are receiving a lot of feature requests every day. So you cannot force people to just stop their work and start the migration. So actually, what we can do is just to provide enough support, And I guess very importantly, we have a team that is open enough to the new changes, and we very enjoy working together very much. And actually, we help each other, and I think that's very important. It's that if we have more experienced users, we help the users that just migrated. So I think, yeah, that's the end of my sharing. Thank you very much. And we are also hiring. So we will post the job openings later.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Chenmu. Great talk. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, please submit them. So here's our final speaker. Please give him a welcome.
Awesome. Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Cool. So tonight I'm going to talk about building Figma's community, and especially, I mean, the Figma online community. If I speak too fast, just like wave your arms, because I know this is a lightning talk, and so I want to make sure I finish in the right time, but I don't want to talk too fast. Okay. So we're going to go through what is Figma, the power of the internet, building an online community, and then what's next. And I think we're going to all do a Q&A together. So first off, what is Figma? Figma is a collaborative design tool, and Figma's vision is to make design accessible to everyone. We really want to make it so that anyone in the world can communicate visually through Figma. And when we think about that, today design means a lot around interface design, but ultimately we hope that means visual communication in the future. And it's pretty amazing the growth of the design field in the past 7-8 years as we've worked on Figma. We started working on Figma in August 2012. So it's been about 7.5 years now. And you know, I never would have imagined that, first of all, some of these companies would exist 8 years ago, but also you know, now that I actually get to work with them, it's absolutely a dream come true. And I think it's also amazing just to see how over the last 8 years, you know, in 2012 when we started Figma, IBM had 72 engineers to every one designer across the company. 5 years later, in 2017, they went to a ratio of 8 engineers to every one designer across the company, and 3-to-1 on mobile. And so there's been just a vast change in the industry, and we're all starting to see that catch up. And the reason for that is because it's really important now that if you want to win as a company, that you have a great design effort. Otherwise, you're not going to win. And the more that people internalize that, the more that we're seeing the design field grow. So just to get a sense of the room before I go talk about some things about what is Figma, how many of you have never heard of Figma before? Okay, it's a good baseline. How many have worked with Figma just a little bit? It's totally fine, just raise your hands, don't be shy. Okay, so I'd say like 15%. Elena's my fiance, she's right there, and she's gonna help adjust the slides. This is all in Figma. How many of you use Figma regularly? Okay, great, majority. And how many of you would say that you are an expert in Figma? Come on, raise your hands. Come on. Okay, we got a few. This is a very modest crowd. I like that. Perfect. So I will breeze through this next section then. So the power of the internet, we decided to make Figma cloud first. And the reason why is because we think that gives a ton of advantages over desktop first software. For example, right now I'm observing myself on my phone as I change slides. And that's how I'm able to use this as a pointer rather than having to be at the computer. One of the biggest ways we make design accessible to everybody is by making it so that with Figma, I can send you a link and you can just sign up, design, share instantly, rather than having to go through a complex install process and maybe it taking 30 minutes. And I think this is really important because let's say you're designing and then you share something to a product manager or an engineer for the first time. You want them to actually see your work. And if they have to download software to do that, they probably won't. And ultimately, if you want them to edit something, let's say you're sharing it with a content writer, it's going to be very hard to get them to start using a tool. But if you can get them to just go into a web browser link, I think it's much more like communication that way. The second one is that Figma is cloud native, and that means that because we're in the browser, you can use Figma on any operating system. Is another thing that I think is really important when we're trying to make it so that design is accessible to everybody. Because in order to make design accessible, you have to be wherever the user is. And so we still have work to do. We still want to make Figma much better on a lot of different mobile operating systems, for example. But right now, we work on Chromebook, Windows, Linux, Apple, and this is a reason why I think 81% of our weekly actives are actually outside the United States, and a lot of people all around the world are using Figma. Multiplayer editing obviously is something that we're really proud of, and I think it makes it so that you can interact with Figma files much like you do the real world in a real space. I think this makes it so that rather than having to kind of trade letters, instead you can almost have this feeling of working together side by side in a workshop and collaborating truly. Design systems we've heard about tonight already. These are some non-typical examples from Square. Square has a lot of different fictional pictures as well as autographs that they use, and they can just pull into the design system. And I think it's also really important that we have this networked file system where once you pull that into your file, let's say it changes, now you can just pull in the update as well. Same for plugins. When you make a plugin in Figma, you don't have to install any updates. You just refresh the page and you now have the latest version of the plugin. And finally, like we just showed as well, you can also start to see the actual analytics for how your libraries are being used, which is really impossible to do if you're not all in the cloud. Finally, one of the things I think is going to be increasingly important for us over time is the ability to communicate, collaborate, and also integrate with all these other web-based platforms. We're seeing not just Figma on the web, we're seeing everything go to the web. And as everything goes to the web, being able to be part of that integrated story is even more important. And so one thing that we've done is we've invested not only heavily in a plugin API, but also in a web API that makes it so you can get data out of Figma really easily. So I have skipped over, though, the thing that I think is the most important reason to be on the web. And that's just the simplicity of a link. The power of a link is that I can send it to you and it's always a source of truth. But even more importantly, when I share it out, then you're able to actually interact with it and you're able to get data from it. And I think this will empower entirely next generation of what could be a design community. So let me explain. To do that, I actually had to go back to December 2013. So when we started Figma, we thought that instead of building a SaaS tool for companies first, which is why we're all here tonight, we thought instead let's actually build a community first that has a tool attached, and then we'll build the SaaS tool second. So here's some of the original mock-ups from 2013, made in Photoshop at the time, because we were not yet using Figma. It wasn't very advanced yet. It wasn't until 6 months later that we started using Figma inside of Figma. And you can kind of see, like, here's a feed for what people are posting. Here are suggestions of who you should follow. Here's designs that are popular. Here are some updates for what looks like maybe a team. You can even have like a file page where you're able to see the comments people make, etc. And so this idea of a community has obviously been around for a long time, both for Figma, but also for other companies too, like Dribbble and Behance. But we thought it would be very different and differentiated to make it so it's all on the web and make it so that people are able to interact with Figma and then instantly be able to remix something, open a file up, see how it's made. So again, we started talking to people, and at the time it just didn't make sense for us. We got the feedback that the majority use case was going to be working inside of teams. We never lost sight of that idea. Some of the inspiration at the time that we thought was really cool, this is actually a project called 10,000 Sheep by a guy named Aaron Coblin. And I think it's really special. How many people here have heard of Mechanical Turk? A few people. So Mechanical Turk is basically a project from Amazon where it's called artificial intelligence. You can pay people to do small tasks over the internet. In this case, Aaron paid people 2 cents USD to draw a sheep facing to the left. That was the only instruction. And so all these random people all over the internet created 10,000 sheep, and then he made a piece of artwork on it, which I thought was really cool. Another example was an application called DrawQuest. This is from a guy named Chris Poole. Maybe some of you have actually used it, but DrawQuest was basically an iPad app where you had these quests, and they're just like these basic templates. And with the quests, you could draw on top of them, and then you could remix other people's content, and you could even see how it was made. And another thing that we thought was really inspiring at the time was this templates from Tian Lax. And these were only in Photoshop at the time, but they're basically ways to use templates for the iPhone that made it easier to create mobile applications. We thought this was exciting because for the first time, people were sharing in an open source way. You can see in the top left, if you look really closely, it says, just do whatever you want with it, just don't sell this, please. And we thought this is really special because usually UI designers don't just put work out there. And in order for our industry to evolve, we need to make it so that people share more. And so these were some of the things that were inspiring to us that led us to think a community could be useful, but it wasn't the right time. So fast forward 7 years. It's okay. Sometimes software takes a long time. We finally, in October, we launched the first closed beta of the Figma community. And it's a closed beta, meaning that you can't, not everyone is inside of it yet. You can't just go sign up. You can apply. And if you, I'll say this later too, but if you're interested in being part of it, email me. My email is Dylan, D-Y-L-A-N, @figma.com, and just put in the subject line, Singapore. But I'll describe it more and then I'll remind you that at the end of the talk too. So our goals for the community are threefold. First, make it so you can inspect a design file to see its elements. Second, be able to remix ideas and customize it. And third, be able to learn from designers from actual work. And furthermore, the same way that teams, as they start to use Figma, get to join more of an open design ecosystem where they're able to see more about how each other work and they're able to work in a more open and transparent way. We hope we could create that for our customers online in a public setting too. So if we could succeed, I think the thing we'll see is not only more open source design, but also people sharing work before it goes out in order to get feedback from their customers. So MVP alert, the things you're about to see are really rough. And this is the state of what we shipped in October because we wanted to make sure that we, unlike most things that we ship at Figma, where we polish it to death before we put it out there, we wanted to actually put out an MVP for the community that we could learn from with our customers. So the first thing we put out was a profile. And you could post plugins, but also any kind of file to it as well. This is a guy named Zach Grosser who put up a lot of different decks. The second thing we did was we made a file page where you could basically post files from Figma. This is an illustration, and people could duplicate it. And that was it. Like that was the entire community. A lot of issues, I'll go into more of them in a second, but what was magical to see was how much people made. So we saw all sorts of different types of files, illustrations, UI kits, icon packs, prototypes, games. I'll show a few examples. Here's a mobile UI kit. This one's a CSS framework. An iOS UI kit. This one has almost, I think, 10,000 downloads. Great illustrations from around the world. This was one that was created in Nigeria. I think this was in Sweden. I don't know where Diana was, but it just was really cool to see the work that people have been doing in Figma. And they all share this under a CC4 license, which means that anyone can use it and remix it as long as they attribute back to the original creator. Icon packs, some of these I've used myself and they're really, really good, as well as prototypes. The Cybertruck one was actually launched right like 3 hours after the announcement. So it's incredible to see how fast people were able to respond and then make like really cool designs right after real-time news. This is by a guy named Nerd Fox in Russia. I don't know his real name. And then lastly, we have games. And so this was a Pac-Man game. Obviously, you can multiplayer move the Pac-Man around. It's kind of fun. This one's Go. You can take the components. Each one has a state, and you can flip them, as well as reverse the or Othello. And so there's lots more. There's hundreds of other designs that have been posted. But I thought it was really neat to see how much was created in the community. We also had notable publishers like Google posted the material design system, and also GitLab took their complete design system and put it online too. I hope you'll put up your best practices guide maybe later if you haven't already. So the community today. So some of the issues with the community, one of the big issues was that it was completely individually distributed. There's no way to find files. And so basically people would often be relying on Twitter in order to share their work. And the last thing that was really a big issue, I think, that we're trying to address is that there's a limited feedback loop. Let's say I share a file to you or share a file out to the world. First of all, no one's gonna find it. But second of all, even if they find it, I don't know they found it or they've appreciated it because I have no feedback. And so why am I incentivized to work more on it? So what's next? First off, we're working on a new landing experience where you can find both more about plugins as well as files. It'll be a little more curated, at first by us and then later on by the community as we figure out how to do that. The second is we're improving that feedback loop. So we're making it so that through notifications and email, you have a better sense of who's interacting with your files and your plugins that you publish. And then last but not least, making it so people can tag files and plugins and get to the point where people can search for them. We think this will be really important and valuable so that more people will be able to find work in the first place. So the future, where does this all lead? My hope is that, I think if we look at the world today, one of the things that's kind of mind-blowing is how successful open source is. And yet at the same time, we don't have many open source products that we use every day. Most of the products we use maybe have open source in them, but they're not completely open source. I think the reason for that is that most open source succeeds at the developer level and not at the design level. And I think it's really hard for design and open source to commingle. One of the reasons why is because tools haven't traditionally supported these workflows. There is no GitHub for design. And I think one thing that I'm hopeful of is a future where open source projects can start to really challenge industry incumbents. So for example, one behavior I saw on the Figma community that I thought was really interesting was by this guy named Christoph Ono. And he created the Monero UI kit. Monero is a cryptocurrency project, private cryptocurrency. And before he was just posting his designs to Reddit, getting feedback on Reddit for comments. And from there, he would respond to the comments and it was all in Sketch. And so that way people could only interact with it. Developers can only use it if they had a Mac, if they had Sketch. But with Figma, now you can see that the community from Monero is just pressing duplicate and they don't have to have anything except for web browser. If they have a web browser, they're able to open it up, they're able to interact with it, they're even able to fork it and then send it back to him. And that concept of remixing, I think, could be really important here. So just to start, there's so much more that we want to do, but I'm really excited about the idea of open source finally joining up with design. So if you're interested, again, email me, dylan@figma.com. Just put the subject line Singapore. I'll add you to the community, and I can't wait to see what you build. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks. Okay, so let's switch back. Okay, so if you have any questions, please submit them. And in the meantime, we're going to set up the Q&A. Please also. Okay. Thank you. Okay, are we set? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So first question is for you, Dylan. Will you open an office in Singapore?
So I've only been in Singapore for 12 hours so far.
You love it, right?
I actually do love it. It's an amazing city. So I'm excited to learn more about it, but I think a little bit premature for me to answer the question. I will say the next office we're going to open will probably be in Europe. And so we're really focused on that right now. I'm sure we'll open more offices and probably one in Southeast Asia at some point. And Singapore seems to be the leading candidate for city companies that go to Southeast Asia, but too early to say.
Okay, thank you. Which one's the next? Oh, Chenmu, how did you migrate from Sketch to Figma? What are the steps? I don't know who answered. Yeah.
I think during my sharing, I think I explained quite a bit. I think for me, I think the most important thing is that everyone keeps open, and at the same time, we provide enough support. Yeah, that's the two key things. Okay,
thanks. Yuan Qing, anything you think is missing in Figma plugin? Do you have any requests?
So I think right now it's a first version of the API. So I think they are working on things like you cannot access like who is the user accessing running the plugin. You cannot access like libraries as well, I think. So if you have those things, would be pretty helpful. And if there's like an official UI library from Figma, that would be really cool as well.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I guess like for all three of you, if your company is using other tools because they have licensing for them, how do you convince the company to use Figma and get them on board?
I'll start for this one. For us, it's obviously more of an issue to get people to try other tools because we all use Figma every day. So I'll let you go from here, but I think it's really important to burst out of your filter bubble.
We send out email to our boss to explain that it is an efficient tool that can save our resources, save our time, and make our communication better. And it actually saves money also because there is no need to purchase license for viewer access. So actually, it actually saves money in the long term, and it saves time, improves workflow. I guess that's it. Yeah.
So Shopify is actually pretty much 100% on Figma. So we actually did a migration, I believe, middle of last year. I think the value of Figma, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I think it has really brought a lot of value, and the entire company has really migrated, and everybody has really been receptive to this new tool.
Yeah, like successful examples, like Shopify is 100% Figma already.
Using other companies as examples. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, another one for you, Yuan Qing. Do you build plugins for your team? And if so, how do you encourage adoption?
So like a lot of the plugins I made for myself, because I want the tool that I use to be super efficient, and if without the tools, I will be really frustrated and annoyed. But I think some of the tools I have built specifically for Shopify, and I think I shared a couple, like format currency is one of them, language tester is another one. So in terms of encouraging adoption, I think what has been really helpful is to just do a GIF recording of you using the plugin. And then that is going to be a lot more effective than like describing it or sending them a link. Having a GIF that you really show the value of using this plugin and how useful it can be. And then people will be more inclined to start using it. So I would just do a recording, I'll post it on like a couple Slack channels, and then people would be exposed to it. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Chenmu, how has using pages to manage versions worked out for your team so far? Is it scalable? Does it work well with devs and PMs? What's your experience like?
Actually, for us, this is the currently recommended way of work. And we also separate files for our versions also. But I think it is a bit not enough, to be honest, because we only have so many levels to divide, to separate, to how to say, sort our designs. And currently it works fine to me because developers develop in versions, so they need to keep all the versions. And keep pages actually allow them to see what are the changes very fast. So you have a feature and you have different versions on different pages. You can see the changes of the design, the updates very fast. That's the benefit of keep versions in pages. Yeah.
Very good tip. Thank you. Dylan, any plans for Figma to support conditional logic in prototyping?
I think it's a really cool feature request. At some point, we'd probably have to ask ourselves, is it better done in code or in design? And should we expose just more code options for prototyping? That said, this is probably not at the top of our queue right now. We're much more focused on like performance for prototyping, making sure that prototyping works with like things like states, rather than trying to make it so that you can do everything. I think there's always more that you can do with prototyping, and so that's why we want to make sure we integrate really well with other tools.
Okay. Very clear, thank you. Okay, what was this question? Previewing designs on Figma for clients or developers handoff or for commenting can be very slow and laggy. What can we do to improve it?
Wow, okay, I'm glad I said the performance comment last one. Well, I think one thing you can do is break up your files a bit. Some files can get very large. If your file is really big, maybe consider making it several files. That can help. But yes, we're also, I have noticed on this trip alone that in Southeast Asia, the network speeds, not necessarily for you, but just in terms of connecting to Figma, are not as fast as they could be. And so we're definitely taking a look at sort of network availability and what we can do to make sort of edge speeds faster as well.
So are you going to have some more servers placed here in the region so we can have a faster speed? Is that so?
We need to look into it more.
Okay.
There's it's not a simple answer, and I think we need to really do some experiments first.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
But we're obsessed with performance would be the important thing to take away. Whether it's loading or runtime performance, like this is something that we are completely obsessed with.
Okay. Another quick question for Chenmu. Having migrated from Sketch to Figma, is there anything you think Figma could improve on? Or maybe a functionality in Sketch that you wish Figma has?
Oh, yeah, I think actually quite a lot. And we kind of getting feedback from our designers from time to time, and we just record them down. I think currently the most important thing for us is file organization, because the things are getting very big, and we are trying to include our local design teams also. So I think right now one of the larger things about file organization, and also I think Figma should improve. I think about the speed. And also, because speed is one thing, it's all about like internet connection. Because Southeast Asia, I think a lot of times our infrastructure is not very good. And a lot of times if we travel to a rural area, internet connection is not very good. But actually you can open the Figma file first and you can work on it. But when you close Figma, it won't work again. I think it should be.
That's something that we're going to fix, by the way.
Yes, I think it won't be a very difficult. Personally, I feel that it won't be a very difficult thing to allow people to at least able to edit and then synchronize everything after they get back online. Yeah, and then it's just about internet speed, and I think that's the main problems for us. Yeah, right now, the main ones. Yeah.
And Yuan Qing, do you have any requests as well, or missing things then?
I think I face the same problem as you, because I've been doing a lot of traveling past couple of months, and then Figma just doesn't work without internet. If you are on like another tool, you might just open the file and then it works. So that is like maybe one thing that I miss about the fact that other tools are not connected to internet. As for like other things that Figma can improve on, like by the fact that it is a web-based tool, as in to me, it could feel a bit, it's not native, right? So as in, to me, there's a bit of a performance difference with when you compare it against like a native tool. But there's, I think, one of the limitations of like betting on web, I guess. So the native feeling of like, it is more responsive to me with regards to using other tools. So I think these are the two that I can think of right now.
I actually have something more to say because like, for our teams, actually, our PMs, a lot of them require editor access, but they just want to change the wordings. I think it will happen a lot. Like we fix the design and PMs change the wording for us. But what they need is only just change the wording instead of the design. I think Figma can have, it would be very good if Figma have different level of access instead of just viewers and editors, so that people have different editor access and maybe different pricing plans, but it's just, but providing different options will be better because the most of the time the PMs, we do not share the editor access to PMs, but they really need to change it. And you will really get things very fast if they can change the wordings directly.
Yeah, +1 for me for that. Yuan Qing, how do you collaborate with the rest of Shopify team who's not here in Singapore? Do you all use Figma at Shopify, and when did you migrate?
So as in, the thing about Shopify, like for us here in Asia, is that there's actually a time difference. So when it comes to like real-time collaboration, there's gonna be very little of that. So it's actually 12 hours. It's entirely from on the other side of the world. Shopify is a Canadian-based company. So like the real-time aspect of it isn't really a value to us. I think the thing that's added value, I think, is the idea that a link can be shared to anybody and anybody can go in and add comments. So a lot of the collaboration that we do is going to be asynchronous. So we will just rely on people giving us comments and then we will iterate on the feedback that we get the next day. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the idea. That is a link and I can share it.
Okay, cool, thanks. Dylan, I have a question for you about why did you decide to deliver Figma through a web browser? And if mobile web is the future, is Figma working on touch-based input support?
For web browser, I mean, like I have been a fan of the web since I was a kid. I grew up on Google Docs, and to me, I don't know why you would make software not on the web if you don't have to. I think it's actually possible to make web apps performant and more performant as native competition. And I also think that, you know, there's sort of the question of like what feels native and what does that mean? It ends up being different depending on what native is. Is it Mac? Is it Windows? Is it a different platform? So I think that the more that our UI libraries and native or on web evolve, the more native web apps will feel anyway. I just, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier in terms of being cross-platform, being accessible through a link, I think it's the clear choice. For the second part of the question around touch, we think it'd be really fun to get to the point where Figma has more touch support. It'll come in waves. First of all, we're definitely interested in making it so that we have better mobile support. Over time, we'll probably have it so that Figma, as it is today, can be more touch enabled. The ultimate thing to build here that'd be really fun to build would be something where you've got like every keyboard shortcut accessible through like your fingers as you work on touch, like on a tablet. I think that would be a pretty big design challenge to pull off. So I think that would be very far off, and it would only be when we know the market is there that we invest that time. But it would be so fun to build. So hopefully you all go and buy tablets so that we can do it.
You heard it from him, buy tablets. Chenmu, are your Figma guides for designers, PM, developers available for others to view, or are you able to share the guides? Very helpful, I agree.
Okay, first, I think for me, I should make it better. We are still improving it. I would say that we are still improving it. And whether we could share, I need to ask my boss. And then, And I think the idea of sharing is knowledge sharing is very important. Personally, I believe that. Yeah. So hopefully you can have actually the better idea is that we set up a document that invites everybody and everybody can contribute to the document. That's like open source the idea, right? So I think that's the even better idea. But personally for Shopee, we are still improving on the guides. Yeah, so it's still like not the very official one, but we are still improving on it. Yeah, hopefully I can share with the guys. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Maybe something for in the community.
Yes, I think we should create something as a community that we contribute together. That would be very good.
Yes. I guess for all of you, what's been your experience with the version control system compared to Abstract? Are there conflicts when you have many designers working on the same file? Okay. So I guess both of you can
I think for this question, it is different compared to Abstract because there isn't conflict versions and because everything is up to date. So everybody can collaborate together. So it's, there isn't a version sort of different branches of the design. And we keep versions at different pages of files, designs, as you think. So personally, I feel that Abstract is very like following the Git, like engineering. But personally, I think it is not really necessary for design versioning. Personally, this is how I feel because if we keep everything updated and keep all the history revisions, we do not need branches, different branches, and we merge together. It will cause problems. So Figma do not have the branches and versioning, right? So everything is up to date. Everything is the newest one. Yeah, so it's very different from Abstract. Yeah, and I feel that conflict with many designers. The most time we try is 20 plus designers working on the same file. And to be honest, it's a bit like it, but it's not causing conflicts. Yeah, that's our experience so far, 20 plus designers.
Okay, wait.
Use voice projection. So what if you have a scenario where you do something wrong and then you realize, let's say, for example, you use the wrong component or you've like broken the symbol down into something.
In that case, Figma has a version history that you can always, it's auto-saved every couple of minutes, 3 minutes, so you can always refer.
Is it like Google
back.
Docs where you, it's like a version of the whole thing?
Yes,
or
yes.
are they like individualized according to each person? So if you,
it's not I would say it's not individualized to each person, and it's saved automatically every minute, and because it's not branches, so everybody is working on the same file, and then you can also save a version by yourself and name it like version something, and you can reverse it back at some time. But the request that you raised, like different people with different files, is not achievable in Figma currently.
that's correct. I think the one thing I just add is that if you make a change and then I make a change and you make a change, that will automatically make 3 versions as well. So that way it's like you can always get back if someone else changes something. Another thing we want to improve there is getting to the point where there's clear diffs. Right now it's like the entire file changes, and in the future we want to get to the point where it highlights what changed and makes it really clear.
Thank you so much. Okay, for everyone, Figma is a live platform. How do you hand off the design to development mode? Still need to work on the same screen. I think you can.
You just keep a fixed version into a different page and then work on the same page. Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Do you do the same thing, or?
I think clearly labeling everything in Figma, like make sure everything is labeled properly, is going to be very helpful. But I think the fact of the matter is that design will always keep changing anyway. So just lean into it, like accept that it will change.
Okay, yeah. Dylan, you have any tips for us?
We already talked about it, yeah.
Okay. Yuan Qing, curious how Shopify organizes your files. Yeah, you have a large team. How do you deal with this?
I don't think I know enough yet about Shopify to really give a good answer to this question. I imagine it will be similar to any other company where we have projects and teams. The way that Shopify is organized is into product lines. So for myself, I'm in the international product line. And then I believe my team is like export fit. We would have what is called project, and then this project will have many files within it. I believe that is a very simple structure that we have right now.
Okay. Dylan, how do you see the Figma community working together with current design communities like Dribbble and Behance?
I see it solving a pretty different problem. I think it's probably not, given that it's just Figma files, I don't think this can be where people create their entire portfolio. I think instead it's a place where people share work, eventually get feedback, but in a more deep way. Whereas otherwise, right now, it's like very much like, oh, it looks good, it's pretty. Like, I hope that people do more deep feedback here. People remix each other's work. And it'll be sort of a different way of working in this community, which I think can be complementary to Behance and Dribbble. We really like them. Yeah. They're great teams.
Cool. Yeah, really more about helping people grow, I guess, right? Yeah. Okay. When will Figma support GIF like Google Slides with a copy and paste function to use as presentation deck?
Feel free to come up to me later if you ask this question. I'm not sure I totally understand, but we do support GIFs.
Yeah.
And we do, if you make frames, then you press play, you can use Figma for slides, which is kind of like what I was doing tonight. But maybe if I'm not sure I'm answering the question, so definitely, you know, if you're the anonymous person behind this, find me later.
Yeah. Okay, for any speaker, moving away from Figma, what would you recommend on ways to portray the user's flow that involves different systems and other individuals? Wait. Okay, I have a hard time understanding. Wait, no? Oh, okay, yeah. Can someone elaborate? I know it's an anonymous, but okay, sorry. Okay, so, yeah, okay. Okay, so these are the questions. Okay, this is the end of the Q&A. Thank you so much for answering all the different questions. And we're gonna go now to the job openings.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so as usual, if you haven't been to a Figma Meetup before, at the end we usually share job posts. So for today, since we have a lot of companies, we actually have a lot of open positions. The first one is from Shopify. So Shopify is hiring senior UX designer and senior UX researcher. You can contact Jennifer, take a photo. If your boss is here, I'm sorry. Too bad. We will be sharing these slides later, so you can find them after that. Do you want to share?
What? Yeah,
You wanna
1
share
minute
some?
pitch.
Yeah.
So I think we're looking for people who can deal with ambiguity and complexity. So the problems that we are dealing with are they're non-trivial, I guess. And the target audience that we are focusing on is actually China. So maybe some domain knowledge in that front would be quite helpful. It will maybe set you apart. It's sort of an interesting sort of opportunity given that the team is fairly new. The Singapore office, I think, really started growing only last year. So it's sort of a small office. You basically know everybody in office. It's sort of like almost like a startup within Shopify, which could be interesting. So please feel free to chat with me and the DT later if you want.
Do you travel to Canada?
There is a significant travel. We are traveling to China. We have traveled to Canada. So like you must be prepared for that as well.
Okay, cool. You
Thank
said
you.
that we can also reach out to Aditi, who's the team lead, right? Can you stand up so people know? Right, thanks. Okay, find her after. Thanks for that. Next one, we have Shopee. So Shopee is hiring product managers and UI UX designers. Chenmu, do you want to share something about the? No? Yes?
We're hiring UX designers. We are a very fun team. And I think, yeah, we are looking for someone better with development knowledge or not. I think I think you should talk to our HR later. I'm not sure.
They're over there. You can find them with the shirts.
if you're interested, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you can also contact Avery at Shopee as well. Okay, last but not least.
Okay, yeah. So at Rock to Vicky, where I work, we're also looking for someone to join my team. So Rock to Vicky is a VOD. We do Korean drama mostly. And for this role, we're actually looking for someone who can help out with our subtitling community. We have a large group of volunteers who create awesome subtitles for all our content. And it's a really great community, and we want to improve their experience. So that's one part of it. And another part is where you also help our own colleagues. So we have a lot of internal tools where we really want to improve those tools and help the experience for our colleagues as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, please reach out to me here right now, or you can email Divya. Okay, thank you.
Cool, that's it. So that's the end of our fourth Figma Meetup and the first one of 2020. So this is the first time that we actually do this. We should have done this a while back. It's in our another QR code, but you can actually scan it and give us feedback. If you don't like something, let us know.
Yep.
You want to see
Please
more
help
of
us
something.
grow.
Yeah.